Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. It's been a little while since we've done one of these recap videos. I haven't done them as much in the second half of the season. Honestly, just got kind of burnt out. It takes a while to make these videos, but I'm back. They're going to be ramping up going into the playoffs and be pretty frequent once we get there. And tonight is a great chance, I felt like, to bring it back because of all the interlocking storylines going into the playoffs. And tonight we got the return of an MVP caliber player and a guy who I still think can make a lot of noise in the playoffs, even if a lot of people don't believe in him and his team. Before we get to that, though, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy and want to see more of these recaps. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And as always, I'd love to hear your takeaways from these games down below in the comments. Let's go and get into it. Starting things off, we had Sixers versus Thunder on TNT, and I'm sure, as you already guessed, the return was Joel Embiid. After missing multiple months, I think going back to January 30th is when he got hurt against the Golden State Warriors with that knee injury. He finally returned, and it was a weird process to him coming back. Coming into today, it was said that he was going to be out, despite some rumors that today may be the day he's targeting to return. And then Shea as well as Jalen Williams were ruled out for OKC. And then not too long after, boom, Embiid is moved to questionable. And then Woj says actually he's 100% going to play. Nick Nurse says no, we're going to go through the warm-ups and see. It was pretty clear that Embiid was going to end up playing. Weird circumstances. I imagine maybe they thought, okay, this would be a good chance to ease him back in a little bit if the Thunder don't have two of their better players out there. And as a Thunder fan, I want us to win to get better playoff seeding, but I understand it. It makes sense why they did so. And Embiid looked pretty solid in his return as the Sixers got a win. He ends up putting up 24 points, 6 rebounds, 7 dimes, and 3 steals while shooting 6 of 14 from the field. Did have 6 turnovers, but all this happened in just 29 minutes played, and he was doing some typical Embiid stuff, hitting those just unstoppable mid-range jumpers he was banging down low. Of course, Joel Embiid getting to the free throw line, battling through contact, had some great defensive plays all throughout the game, was a menace around the rim, just deterring guys from even trying him, as well as locking down on Giddey on the perimeter to get a steal and end up costing the Thunder potentially the game. They were down 1 at that point, trying to go ahead and score. The Thunder would have some chances in the final moments to hit a number of pretty open threes, but ultimately couldn't capitalize. Embiid also came up big in that fourth quarter, helping to erase the Thunder lead with 10 points and 2 boards with 2 steals in that period. He was really good. He wasn't, the typical Joel Embiid that we're used to seeing, where he's putting up like 36, 40 points, 10, 15 boards, a few dimes, like 3 blocks. He clearly wasn't 100% himself, specifically with the conditioning. There were multiple times this game where Embiid had his hands on his knees. He was clearly gassed, wasn't even running back after making a stop defensively. He was like, y'all got it on the offensive end. He was getting to the free throw line and taking a moment. When he got hit to the ground, he was laying there for a second. It was clear that the conditioning isn't quite there yet, which after missing 3 months makes sense, especially going up against a Thunder team that loves to run up and down the court. He was exhausted, and I think that's going to get back to his usual conditioning over time, but it was something really noticeable in this game. What else was noticeable? Really liked how he played off Buddy Hield. This was the first game that Embiid got to play with Buddy, and I feel like their two-man game was really fun. This was one of the most exciting parts about that Hield trade when the Sixers made it, is how are the two of them going to play alongside each other. One of the best three-point shooters ever in Buddy Hield, playing against a guy who demands double teams and is one of the most dominant interior scorers in the history of the game. It felt like a match made in heaven, and in this game, you saw some flashes of how good that could be. Overall, just a really solid return from him in the win. It was just in general great to see him back out there. I really missed watching Joel Embiid. He was putting up ridiculous numbers at the beginning of the season, and since then, it's just been a really unfortunate year for both him and Philly, because at the beginning, when Embiid was playing, they were incredible, and they've fallen really far in the period that he's been hurt. However, it's not over for the Sixers. They maintained their spot at the very worst as a play-in team, could theoretically catch up to the 6-seeded Pacers, although with just 6 games left, it's going to be tough. Right now, they would play Miami in the first play-in game, which would be a really fun game, a lot of history between those two teams, and even if they lose that first play-in game, I think they're going to find their way to the playoffs somehow, and once they get there, I think Philly still has a chance to make some noise. Like, if we go back to January 29th, the day before Joel Embiid had that injury against Golden State, the Sixers were 29-16. They were just a couple games back of the Bucks for the 2 seed, and looking really great as a squad. Embiid himself was the runaway MVP at that moment. He was putting up like 36 points per game, playing ridiculous defense, unprecedented efficiency. It was the best basketball that Embiid had ever played. It was some of the best basketball that I had seen from anyone ever. It was going to go down as a historically great year. I think he was probably going to run away with the MVP award despite all the great candidates we have this season. And there are some people who believe he might have won unanimously. I'm not sure if I'd go quite that far because, again, a lot of great talent and great cases in the NBA, but I think he definitely would have won it handily. And that's crazy thinking about where we are at the moment, but that's just how good he was. You also had Tyrese Maxey playing at an MIP all-star level, supporting cast of guys like Kelly Oubre, Nick Batum, D'Anthony Melton, Paul Reed, Robert Covington, Tobias Harris, was holding up pretty well. Nick Nurse, best coach the Sixers have had in this Joel Embiid era, definitely better than Doc Rivers and Brett Brown. For the first time, it felt like they had an actual scheme and an identity in place, and it felt like a bit of the improvement we were seeing from Embiid was because of the way that Nick Nurse was setting this team up. It just looked fantastic over there in Philadelphia. They had a different feel, a different vibe around them, and it had me thinking they may be the second best team in the East, only behind Boston. They were at least in the conversation with Milwaukee for that second spot. It's been 3 months since we saw that version of the team, and of course they've plummeted down the standings since, but with Embiid returning, Covington on the cusp of returning, Buddy Hield here now, Kyle Lowry here now, he's been pretty good as a Sixer. I think they've got the personnel to make it happen. It is going to require Embiid looking like himself. Clearly, again, wasn't 100% tonight. Conditioning was off, rhythm wasn't quite there, but he's got 6 more games of the regular season to try and get back to his usual self, and it's an interesting mix. He's got games against Memphis, San Antonio, Detroit, and Brooklyn, who are some worse teams, so those games should be a bit easier for him to refine his rhythm, and then he's got a couple of tests, one against Orlando and one against Miami, which may be a preview of that play-in game going up against Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. That'll be a good test for Embiid to see where he's at. It's not a lot of time, but it's better than him jumping straight into the playoffs like it felt like he may have to do earlier on in the injury process. I also think avoiding Boston would be huge for them trying to make a deep run because that team's a bit of a juggernaut, and I like their chances against Milwaukee way better than I like their chances against Boston, who have given them so many problems in the past. But if Embiid gets back to anywhere close to the level he was at the beginning of the season, and they do avoid that Boston matchup in the first round, this is a team that I think can go as far as pretty much anybody in the Eastern Conference. They were a top 7 team on both sides of the ball before the injury, and had the 3rd best net rating only behind Boston and OKC, with again Embiid playing at a brand new level. I know he and the Sixers have this reputation as chokers, a team that really never gets it done in the biggest moments, but the vibe really did feel different around this team. I know I'm not alone in this. I'm sure a lot of you don't agree with me, but it felt like this was a chance for their revenge tour. I think Nick Nurse, again, is a way better coach. We've never seen him beat at this level. The emergence of Maxey was huge. I like the supporting cast a lot better, and it just felt like a more well-rounded team that for some point actually had an identity, unlike a lot of the Sixers teams of the past. Plus, the Eastern Conference is kind of up in the air right now. The Bucks have been wildly inconsistent throughout the season. They've had some great periods. They've had some terrible games. I mean, tonight they lost to the Wizards out of all teams. The Cavs have been pretty beat up throughout the year. Same thing with the Knicks. They still don't know when they're getting Julius Randle and OG Anunoby back, if at all. The Magic are really young. Same thing with the Pacers. And you've also got Tyrese Halliburton fighting an injury over there in Indiana. The Heat also have been wildly inconsistent. They have some injuries going on. Like on paper, if all these teams are fully healthy, the East would be insane. But with the injuries and just the weirdness that has gone on this season, it does feel like there's a path somewhat open for Philly to do something similar to what the Lakers and Heat did last season if they can replicate their play from the beginning of the year. There is a possibility they just can't because it's so late in the season. They miss so much time to build chemistry. And again, we don't know what Embiid is going to look like in a high-stakes playoff environment with his current condition, but I think the potential is absolutely there. I am not writing off this Sixers team whatsoever. I know some people are going to, but I'm going to stick to my guns that things were different early in the year, and I still think they can be going into the playoffs. They're the wild card to me. That could really flip the script on the Eastern Conference, and I hope they make it interesting. I really like this Philly squad. I like Joel Embiid a lot. He proved me and a lot of people wrong at the beginning of the season because it didn't feel possible that he would go out there and win his second MVP award, and he absolutely would have won back-to-back MVPs if he didn't get hurt. There's no question in my mind about that. I wonder where they'd be in the standings. I wonder what conversations we would be having about Joel, what our perception of the Sixers would be if he stayed healthy, and my hope is that he can somewhat get back to that form and can prove a lot of people wrong and make some noise. I really think they have that Lakers Heat potential from last year to make a deep NBA playoff run despite being one of those play-in teams. Maybe this is the year they finally go ahead and break that second round curse, but even if they don't, at the very least, they will have a max slot coming up in the offseason with Tobias Harris coming off the books. There's some interesting free agents. I know they have rumored interest in Paul George. They'll at the very least get a look at this team in a playoff setting to figure out, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to shape this roster around Embiid? But, they would like to make a deep run still. They still have the hope for that. I think they can do it, and, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm looking at this through rose-colored glasses because I do want to see Embiid, silence the doubters. Maybe I'm wrong though, maybe they're just going to choke again like they have in the past. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but for the moment, I am still in on the Sixers hype train. For the Thunder, like I said, not a lot of takeaways. We're without Shea and Jalen Williams in this game, who are their go-to shot creators, go-to scorers in the clutch. The offense was really bad down the stretch of this game. The Sixers defense was also just really good, but none of the usual guys that the Thunder go to, so not a lot of takeaways. Hopefully both of them are back for the matchup against Boston on national TV, because that game feels like it could be really special. The one earlier this season was itself. Moving on now, we had Mavericks versus Warriors, which felt like a high-stakes playoff game. This one had an elite playoff-like atmosphere. The teams kept swapping big leads, and the Warriors end up coming out on top, and it wasn't really Steph Curry who has been carrying them a lot of the season. He had just 13 points. It was mainly the other guys. Andrew Wiggins, 23 points, one of his better games of the season. Draymond Green had a great game, 11 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals, and a block. Typical prime Draymond Green stat line. Down the stretch, he had some amazing defense, including a big block on Daniel Gafford, saved the ball from going out of bounds, ended up hitting a bucket. I think on the next possession it was. Just all around great performance from him. Chris Paul had 14 points, vintage CP3 with some of those mid-range buckets. Moses Moody was huge off the bench with 12 points. Overall, team effort. It really solidified them, I think, in this game as a play-in team. Houston also lost in this one, so the Warriors now, I think, have a 2-game lead on the Rockets. A 3-game lead even, actually, as I check the standings here. So the Rockets' play-in hopes are probably dashed at this moment. They made a really good run, but the Warriors are solidifying themselves here, moved to 7 games above 500, which it's insane that they're the 10 seed with that record. But yeah, impressed by the team effort today, especially against a Mavs team that's been surging. And Luka and Kyrie tried to do their things. Luka had a 30-point triple-double, Kyrie had 27, but the team as a whole had some pretty bad offense down the stretch. The Warriors defense really locked in, and there's just some inconsistency across the board. PJ Washington had a really rough shooting night in particular, 8 of 19 from the floor. Not a lot of great stuff coming from them off the bench. They really could have used this game to make up some ground on the Clippers ahead of them in the standings, especially because LA lost tonight, but couldn't get it done. Still some chances to do so, and are still sitting at the 5 seed in the Western Conference with a few games left to play. Speaking of the Clippers, they faced off against the Kings tonight. No Kawhi Leonard for them in this game, which meant they were going to need a lot more out of PG and Harden to take down Sacramento, who are fighting for their lives, trying to avoid the play-in at all costs. And the Clippers didn't really get that extra production. Just 18 points on 5 of 12 shooting from PG, and just 6 points from Harden on 1 of 7 shooting. He, in particular, was really rough. He had 5 turnovers in this game as well. The defensive effort was really bad from him, as well as kind of the team as a whole. And it just continues the trend of the Clippers really lacking in identity, any type of effort or intensity in the third quarter. The Kings started to surge, really take over in this one, and the Clippers just didn't have any sense of urgency. Like, there was, I think, 7 or 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. When they put their bench guys in, they just took PG, Harden, everybody out, and let the bench run out there because it seemed like there was clearly no effort or drive to try and make up the 20-point deficit they were in at that moment, try and go for a comeback. They just don't seem to really want it, and I'm getting kind of worried about LA. I know they didn't have Kawhi in this game, but it's becoming a running theme for them that they kind of just give up and have it look like their dominant selves from earlier on in the season. They're somewhat limping into the playoffs. They do still have great talent, but it is concerning the way they've been playing as of late. For the Kings, a good win for them puts them tied with the Suns in the play-in race. Fox struggles shooting from the field. Keegan Murray was really good. Sabonis was excellent, had 22 and 20, continues his great season. And they just did a really good job of stifling any momentum the Clippers tried to build after halftime, trying to, like I said, avoid the play-in tournament. 1 game back of the Pelicans at the 6th spot. We'll see if they can do it. And the final game I want to go in-depth into is Spurs versus Nuggets, mainly because Jokic versus Wemby was insane. Joker finished with 42, 16, 6, 1, and 2 on 56% shooting, while Wemby came just 1 block and 2 dimes away from a quadruple-double, 23 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists, a steal, and 9 blocks. These two guys are completely ridiculous. They were trading buckets, ridiculous highlight plays left and right. It's one of those individual matchups that shows you both the now and the future of the sport. I'm really excited that we have many more duels between these guys to come down the line. Hopefully we see a playoff battle between the two of them at some moment, because this one game, a meaningless one pretty much for the Spurs at the very least in April, was enough to make me wish there were 30 more battles between these two guys the rest of the season. Just unbelievable stuff. If you didn't watch the highlights, go check it out, because it was some of the most interesting hoops I've ever watched. Big men shouldn't be able to do the stuff that these two players can. To wrap wrap things up, let's go ahead and rapid fire the rest of the games. The Wizards beat the Bucks due to a 27-7 game from Corey Kispert and 16-4 and 13 from Jordan Poole. The Lakers get another win behind 23-4-9 from LeBron in Toronto, typical stuff from him in the North. The Heat beat the Knicks by 10 due to a big night from Terry Rozier. The Wolves, like I said, pretty much end the Rockets' play-in hopes behind a 25-point game from Naz Reid. And the Cavaliers blow out the Utah Jazz with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, each dropping 21 points. With that being said, those are the games from tonight. Let me know down below in the comments again what your takeaways were from these contests. And what do you think about the Sixers? Am I crazy for still holding out hope in them? Am I going to be proven wrong? Or do you agree? Do you still think the Sixers have a chance to make noise, that they're the wild card in the Eastern Conference? Like, I think they are. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. And like I said, let me know if you want to see more recaps like this. Let me know if you're glad that they're back. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.